All right, so this is another good Maynard story. It was always one of my favorites. We used to go in the front of the bus on travel days. We would just sit across from him and ask him questions. You know, boss, did you know Bird? Did you know Dizzy? What was it like at Birdland? What was it like at Paramount Studios? What was it like having the band in LA? What was it like in England? And he would just go and talk. And a lot of times he would say, he would give you the same story. You could hear the same story 5 times and everything would be different. So who knows what really happened in these stories. But you get the gist of really what happened with him because he repeated it so much, some things stayed the same. So I'm sure that's the stuff that's probably true. But anyway, he worked for Paramount Studios out in LA for the last 2 years. At least this is how he told us. The last 2 years that whole thing existed. It was a 40-hour-a-week orchestra, and you would show up whether you had something to play or not. So if you were playing for a movie or you weren't, you just still would show up. And if you weren't recording, you were just walking around the place. You were walking around the studios, watching them, film movies, stuff like that. And he had some interesting stories. He had some interesting stories about, he's on a lot of the Hitchcock movies, like Vertigo, North by Northwest, I guess Psycho. Bernard Herrmann, the guy that wrote a lot of the music for Hitchcock. Bernard Herrmann and Hitchcock didn't get along. There's some pretty heavy stories. Maybe I'll tell them later on in another thing about Bernard Herrmann, great composer. And then there was, he said William Holden, the actor, would be in the back by the percussion section doing crossword puzzles, just waiting to go on. So it's where all the movie stars and musicians and cameramen and everybody worked. That's where they worked. So they would hang out. So, he's telling us this, and we're in the front of the bus, bunch of guys, and it's funny because the more guys you put together, like the lower the IQ gets, as a group. So we're up front, and we're asking him about, what was it like playing over there, and he was telling some stories. So then someone asked, did you know Marilyn Monroe? Did you ever see her? And Maynard went, oh, yeah, sure, yeah. You'd see her walking around, sure. I mean, they're all there. They're all working. So I'm like, wow, yeah, really? So someone asked, was she good looking, Was she, and Maynard, and this is interesting, Maynard said, she was a pretty girl. She was a pretty girl. And then when they made her up, she looked completely different. But when she just walked around, yeah, she was pretty. Not like the big bombshell you would think. And then he said, but that term, I never forget he said this, he goes, that term, take your breath away, is a real term. I mean, he said it's a real thing that actually happens to you physically when you see something that you can't comprehend, And he says now all the guys are like, what? And Vanessa said, the woman who'd walk around, who when you actually saw her, you would be breathless when you saw her. You would look at her, and he said she was so beautiful, you just kind of couldn't understand it. You couldn't get it. You were just like, and he said it didn't matter whether she was dressed up or she wasn't dressed or she was just wearing some, like a guy's shirt and just baggy clothes. He goes, when she walked into a place, you just stopped breathing and you looked at her. And he said that was Ava Gardner. He says, when you saw Ava, you would be breathless. He said she was, and all the guys in the band were like, oh, Ava, and half the guys didn't even know who Ava was, but Maynard's telling the story. So, this is before everybody had cell phones, otherwise everyone would be, Googling Ava Gardner. But, and then Maynard said, and when she talked, she was just like one of the guys. She was normal, and she was like a normal person, didn't even act like a movie star, not Ava. He goes, she was just so down home, and he goes, when she talked, she would curse and talk just like a bunch of guys with no couth. He says she talked like a trucker, and it made her even better looking. That was a good story. So there you go. Ava Gardner talks like a trucker, makes her even more attractive.